Oh, let's see if anybody else is on. I might be
Hi, I'm on.
Will be recorded.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So I don't have to be on top of it then. They'll be able to hear me. Okay, very good. So let me just get my glasses. Yeah. Never. But okay, so nothing you can do. So notice I just take some notes. I wrote all those. And I went back to all my notes and pulled out all those sheets that I had out. So you just listen to me. So
But we can't see you.
16th century, we're not going to talk about those stuff. 15th century, so much.
I'm sorry we can't see you on Zoom.
The one,
Hello?
okay. So, talk about that. You've been you know what it is? They lived they both of their work was in the 50s. Some of them lived into the beginning of the 16th century. Just notice.
I'm sorry. Hello? We can't see you.
And of course, part of this is an influx already from 1492. Because a lot of them did come originally from either Spain or Portugal. The Portuguese Jews really only started coming in the 1500s. Some Jews left in 1492 to Spain, but the bulk of them, remember, went to Portugal, and then 1497 they had to be converted. But it wasn't until the Inquisition came in the early 1500s, now, let's say 1517, I'm guessing. And then gradually they started. The Jews who went from Spain to Portugal, they were Jews who wanted to remain Jewish. Those who remained behind in Spain, I think they cared more about their property. and gradually, really over the decades and centuries, their connection to Judaism really. So there probably are Spanish people today, if they could trace it back, could be from those original conversos. Portuguese Jews, the same thing. Some of the conversos stayed on in Portugal. But those again, the ones who live in open Jewish, those are the ones who do that, right? And so, for example, that's just even Habib starts off in Portugal, but he eventually ends up in Solana. So that's why he runs here this character of Turkey and Greek. Salonica Thessaloniki, and that became a really very vibrant into the 20th. Where it says there, our teacher, Rabbi Abbasi Barkinura, same thing. Most of his life is in the 15th century, but he doesn't pass away to the beginning part of that 16th century. And he actually originally comes from Italy, and then he goes to live in Israel. All right. Notice there are no famous rabbis from Poland and Lithuania. That's all going to change by coming to the next century. But again, and you think there are not as many, but it was a time of great upheaval, especially because the Spanish, French, Portuguese, Jews, they had to pick themselves up, relocate somewhere. So just to recap for you, so a lot of them went to Italy, and from Italy, not to think it was great in Italy, but it was an initial place en route. They were invited in then by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and that's how they came to live. And from there, they also moved to Greece. This is all part of the Ottoman Empire, as well as the Balkans. So if I know, like in Rochester, a lot of the Jews who go to the Sephardic school there, they come from Monastir, which is Bulgaria. So Europe, but they were more closely aligned, They were living under this Muslim domination until the 20th century. So that's why many of them then left, around that time period. And in Greece too, they'll eventually go to Paris and, some other stuff. In, I was ever interested in the solo that involved, Jewish community. But in the town, I think on the Lower East Side, there's several shuls there from Jews from Greece or Turkey, and they're very, very proud, now of their heritage. But years ago, earlier, right, in the 20th century, mid 20th century, they were like looked down upon. I know my husband always tells me that there was a monastery of several in Rochester. I know some of them might still go on their beds, and they were called the Turks. They weren't coming from Turkey, but that's, how and as I say, looking down upon, it was not a positive way to describe it. There are obviously a trickle of Jews settling in Poland, not so much Lithuania, but they don't become a prominent Jewish community until that 1500s. Let me just see what else I have here with the back. And then it's talking. Oh wait, the way this came out, you're missing the top thing. Hold on. So, okay. So if you want to add, where it says 15th century, the top part should say Austria, Germany on the left, where it says that Rabbi Yaakov Margolius. Right, that's Austria, Germany. You might just want to write that. Yeah, on page 205. So on the left, write in Austria, Germany. In the middle part, write Bohemia, Moravia. Now you can see there are no prominent Jews, Rabbanim, who lived there in that time period. And then on the right is Italy. Okay, and we won't discuss so much some of the earlier demands. Of course, we'll look at a Barbanel. Now, I find that sort of incorrect. They're putting him there as being part an Italian Jew. He only went to Italy in the latter part of his life. He spent the bulk of his life in Portugal and then in Spain. And remember, he was in Bible, and then Bella, Portugal, too. He obviously, and that's when he goes to Italy. So it's only, the last, let's say, 15, 18 years of his life that he did. So I would not say he's an Italian. I mean, I think of him, Portuguese, Spanish. All right. Please to 205, because I think it's interesting to see the differences there. I like looking and seeing, the contrast. Let's just go down now. So let's go back to that 204. Now look what happens in the 16th century. All right, now so all these influx now, these Spanish Portuguese Jews with the Turkish Greece, and we're going to have some more Rabbanim, things are they're now settling down and things are becoming peaceful for them, and they devote themselves more to Torah study and learning. Most of these men you don't really have to know too much about, but they are listed there. Then where it says Eretz Israel, the first man listed there is wrong. Rabbi Yaakov Kallis, let's make an arrow, he belongs to Poland, Lithuania. That's why I say, in Mir Hashem, I should have the time, I'll try to redo this, for next time. But now just make your arrow. He's Poland, he's not Israel. But look how many prominent Jews, Rabbanim, are now coming from Israel. So again, there was always a tiny Jewish community in Israel. We have never left this completely. But now there's going to be this beautiful influx of Jews, from Spanish Jews, maybe Portuguese Jews, and they originally go to Constantinople, some go to Adrianople, And from there, they make their way to Israel. Most of them settled either in Spot, or they go to Jerusalem. But there are Jewish families tiny in Samaria, in Hebron, that have just been there all along. But just look down to the 17th century. Now, we don't see so many coming out of Arab Israel. This is because the Ottoman Empire is moving over there. And while initially, they're living fairly good lives, the Ottoman Empire becomes very corrupt. And the Jews in Israel become impoverished. So there's very few names that are going to be coming out of it than left. Okay, because life was so very, very for them. Look all the way to Britain, Poland, and Lithuania. So we definitely have some very well known Russians in that 16th century. But look at the 17th century. Whoa, look how many. And I'll go over, everything more clearly. But I love to see patterns of migration. I think it's quite fascinating to understand why. And Jews in Poland, Lithuania, already even in the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, they are going eastward. But boy, starting, again, with the 1500s and the 1600s, going to be huge influence for things are going to be bad in Germany. In Germany, they're going to go eastward into Poland and eventually. That's just, okay, so now if you want to turn to the next page, 205. So this is the one that I just told you to exactly. So you'll see, we don't see very much from Bohemia and Moravia. That would be Prague, hopefully, but Moravia, I forget the name of the town there. Many prominent Jews. We see no prominent residents from Austria, Germany, again, because times are bad there and they're going to go to the easy. Again, I'm going to say all, some of the names, but again, it's kind of uneasy going from one duper to another duper. So they can't properly sit there, establish what you go and having many story. And that's like so many different ones. The one famous one, of course, is the Mall Prague. The only one truly great one happened in the 16th century. If you're looking at Italy, again, there's going to be some movement because again, they're from one area of Italy to another area, they're expelled. I mean, constant upheaval. And I have here Ramavati Forno, who knows Forno, commentators, and there's also this Maram from Padua, and his name, you can tell from his name, he's not native to Italy. His name is Rabbi Meir Casanellenboom. So originally he was from Germany, and moved south to Italy, which he thought the sun was good. And then when we go down to the 17th century, so we'll look where it says Austria-Hungary. We have a few other, became fairly well-known individuals. Those coming from Bohemia, Moravia. I'll discuss some of them. Some of them became somewhat prominent. But you see, this part of the world is too sparse. It doesn't have so many great red ones. And then from Italy, a few names, I don't think you would necessarily, know about. I also, yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes, I definitely do. Yes. I think it impacted them tremendously because each little area, the Duke or the Prince or, whoever lived, they each had their own laws. They would expel the Jews from there, they go to another place. Eventually the Prince or Duke might invite them back because they were economically, they were heavily, there was all this anti-Semitic sentiment, and their life, they were constantly moving around. It was like, how you can understand, why they were attracted to move to Poland, because there was stability there. But they're expelled from England in 1290. They don't come back then until that mid-16th century. They're expelled from France several times, but the last one was a complete one, 1394. And then they're expelled from Spain, and then forcibly converted, starting with 1492 and 1497. So where are they supposed to go? It's terrible. It's just awful. I used to have lived in that time period, but unsettled lives. Even some of the Rabbanim, I sort of went through it all. And even they, the first they were off here, no, then they moved to another place, Also, their lives were a bit choppy, although rabbis in general, it was only when I went away to school that I realized that so many of my friends whose fathers were rabbis, they all lived in numerous communities. My father always lived in Harrisburg. I had a very more stable, upbringing. So that was always my hometown. And then we talked separately about those Jews who went to the Ottoman Empire. And of course, you can see it's very good and beautiful flourishing of learning there. But then the Ottoman Empire became so incredibly corrupt. And the Jews just became impoverished, there. Not so, I'm talking about obviously the Jews of Israel in particular. Again, they were still doing okay in Constantinople, the big city, the Adrianople. Greece, I told you, had a very beautiful, strong Jewish community. There was a Jewish community prior to these Western Jews moving in. They were called Romanios, those original Italian Greek Jews. And then they go further north into Bulgaria, again, just because, the Turkey had conquered that whole area. And so for the Ottoman Empire, it was going for 400 years. But again, listen, I don't know as well the dates, but people in the Syrian Jewish, I know that they have certain Rabbanim and that, but they're not like known throughout the Jewish world. Whereas some of these Rabbanim, even from Poland, yes, they are known by everybody, and a lot of their work, they're not as like a separate book, but they're incorporated, in let's say the Shulchan Aruch in particular. So that's the other thing I'm finding to bring out. Yeah. Where were you? Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that we did back in largest achievement was to bring up that.
Yeah.
Because many of well-known scholars.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were kind of with
in the Ashkenazi world, right. And in fact, and the Syrian Jewish community actually was a pretty well-educated community. And those who lived in Turkey and Greece also, but in Israel for sure, tremendous decline, more because of the poverty. The other thing I wanted to bring up, so we have always, through the centuries, had certain great halakha people, so from the Ashkenazi Jews, from Rashi to Tosfos, these people who make commentaries, and on the Gemara, come to Spain, the Rosh Iran. I mean, we had all the Rosh of the first come from Germany, and obviously the Rambam, there was the Ramban. So many famous Jews, and Jews everywhere have accepted, their contributions, to Judaism, their commentaries either on Chumash or again on Gemara, and then starting from there, and then this is when we have the compilation, specifically Rama's mission Torah, you know, and then later like the tour. You know, they start organizing halacha into categories, so it's an easier way to study and learn. But they will eventually, again, they move into Israel, some of these favorite ones, and that will end up with the Shulchan Aruch. And then afterwards, it's those rabbis in Poland who have all the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. So it's interesting. So halacha becomes a prominent thing. Now, Spot is also known as, you know, the place of Kabbalah, and the Arizal is particularly, you know, famous and well known, and he had followers after. And Kabbalah was also always sort of studied, you know, even if within other disciplines. But I would say those rabbis from Poland, Lithuania, was mostly halacha with their emphasis. When we talk about the commentaries, let's say on or not, we have, you know, we have like say we have Rashi in France on the border of Germany, Ramban, century after the Ramban, and then we're talking about Porno. But in Poland, we're not going to have so many people writing commentaries, or not that. That's not what they're going to become famous. You know, they might have written commentaries on certain parts of Polish, possibly written. But the more well-known ones, you know, they had their big emphasis always on halacha, and so many names. You know, again, I certainly got a student of the Talmud, but I recognize it. You know, I obviously heard people spoken like this article quoting, you know, from them. So I you know, I find for me personally. And again, you know, and there really were some great Rabbanim that came out of Moravia, which is, so we think of it as Czechoslovakia, that's the Czech Republic, and what's the other one called? Slovakia. So, but there's a time period where Middle Europe, you know, like they fell from Vienna. You know, later on they're going to come back and it will become a prominent Jewish community for the 19th. But not necessarily from, was a person back in the century. And so many movements. I would say this time period, most of these Jews, they are all observant Jews. It's only as we'll study as we progress, you know, it's more with the introduction of the Haskalah movement, right? Starting in that 18th century, that Jews will be in this time period, they don't stick together. And most of them are okay, so I think I gave you like some of these basic just overall comparisons. I think it's quite interesting. And now let me just have you timeline. So I'm just going to emphasize a few key people. So going back actually to our 15th century provider, when it was talking about this Ibn Habib, we see here with the Turkey Greek. Okay, so he lived from 1445 to 1560. He's famous for this book he wrote called Ein Yaakov. And that's where he combined all the agonic material that's in both the Gemara Bavli and the Gemara Sami. It is our scholars. I don't know if they finished it, but they've been translating that. Because I always like that because when I'm now on doing Yomi, it's so interesting when they have the story, so to speak, you know. So he compiled a separate volume devoted just to that. Else here, yeah, and his son, who follows him, finished his work and then published. But so originally came from Spain, and then he goes to Portugal, and then he goes to Salona. He's no right to be a Greek Jew. And his son also was born in Spain, went to Portugal, and then so with his father he goes to America. And then he goes to live in, right? So it's interesting how the movement all the places back in settling. And he settled in Prague and then in Jerusalem. All right, so I'm not going to discuss more about him. There was also so this is more, I would say, this Israel. So let's pause here. Okay, then when we come to that period, which talks about like Turkey and Greece, okay? So we have, there's one man, the name I want to mention, read down, Rabbi Yosef properly, I guess. He also came originally from Spain, and then they family settled in Monica, and he had there. And I kind of remember Yosef Caro knew of him and of his writings, and he had to incorporate some of his questions that he had with him in his Beis Yosef. Beis Yosef is an initial work, and then he writes like a shorter, organization of halacha. Then he goes to Salonika, and he was a Kabbalist. And there's and I asked you this actually, because I'm not sure. The Radvad is a well-known so. All right. He also came initially from Spain, and he goes to Spot. Initially, they went from Spain to Morocco, and then they go to Israel, and then they settled Spot. But then he went to Egypt, and he becomes actually the chief rabbi of Cairo. But he was mostly, he earned his living as a merchant. And eventually he goes back to Israel, settles to the end of his life, he goes to Tzvat and Cairo, honor, etc. Okay. How about the Mabit? Yeah. That would be impossible. Right, you say, somebody to look up to and to emulate his writing. Interesting here. It says here, he was part of the base there. It says an old decision signed by an entire base. Rabbi Yosef Cairo would honor Radvat and let him sign first. So the other was a real scholar. Tremendous respect for him. Now I have him on bit. So you say that he would be somewhat well known, and he came from Italy, and then he also moved to Salonika, in Greece. Then he moved when he was 18, he moved to Spot, and he became a disciple of, we'll talk about later, there. Okay, he's considered a halachist, trying to pronounce it, all right? And he wrote a book of, he wrote my bit, and includes like something like 800, questions posed in it. And he also had correspondence with he also wrote a book called Kiryat Sefer, right? Isn't there a place in Israel? Which was paraphrased of Rambam's Mishneh Torah. You see how each generation, they build on the generation that went past, whether they're identifying as Ashkenazim or Spartan, but they all recognize these greats who came before support them and will utilize, you know, those writings and guiding them to their own exploration. Then I have his Rabbi Alphabet. He actually was born in Salonika, then he goes to Israel, so that was his fun. He concentrates on Kabbalah in particular. And you know, but he do Rabbi Yosef, whatever. And he's one he well, we don't, because he wrote look on those. All right. Then there's a Rabbi Vitalo Ashkenazi, and he was born in Israel, but then he goes and spent most of his part of early life in Egypt. And he becomes also then the chief rabbi of Egypt. There's a rabbi goes to Israel. Then himself goes back to Israel, settles in the Jewish Alliance. He's known for a very famous book, Kita Mekiketa. It's a compilation of the Kedushin and many of the great Rishonim. So we're not talking about time periods of the early Ashmona, but Rishonim on many of the tractates. So he's also, you know, he's known as a halacha. And he had the Arizal, you know, he was Paulus, you know, had studied on do halacha. Well, there's another road I have in here, Rabbi Moshe Alter. The Alter, he comes from Adrianople. His family had emigrated to Spain, several in Adrianople, and he runs at Cairo. When Rabbi Yosef lived there for a while before he goes to and settles in Spot. Then he goes to Salonika. He learns Hatatsa, we talked about here. And then he goes back to Israel and he lives in Spot. Okay, he was also a young, based in. Apparently he wrote this a popular Torah commentary called Torah Moshe, or simply referred to as Al Shakata. So he obviously, you know, is a commentary. And other books of the Bible, he also wrote things. It says here, although he was a Kabbalist, his commentaries do not reflect his facts. They center primarily on homiletic themes, stressing ethical and inspirational lessons. Now I have here Rabbi Chaim Vital, but I want to do the Arizal first. But the Arizal, who came from Egypt initially, then goes to live and settles in Israel. He was like Kabbalist par excellence. He himself didn't write down, and he died at a very young age. But this Rabbi Chaim Vital was his student, and he compiled and wrote down many of the results sayings. So, for example, many of the Hasidim who then adopted, you know, all these, you know, explanations of how the world works, they are followers of yeah, right. That's how they daven. Right. The Siddur script. So it's not a regular, let's say, Sephardic thing, although it's similar to the part, you know. But it's more comfortable for them. Yeah. Right. Because I remember when diving in a place and I felt like off kilter, you know, because I'm ready to say, let's say, Baruch Shalom. They're in different places, you know, and they're I mentioned this before I was in Italy. Again, I couldn't follow a thing there except for the cottage. I could never find my place. Also, you know what? They say a lot of P is Tim at the beginning. I know I can tell them. Shalom always says, he says, don't come to shul at the beginning because what they're doing is saying to you, you know, so just come at 9:30. So you know, you have to be there early. Okay, we have to thank this Rabbi Chaim, you know, Vital for the fact that we have, you know, writings which were say, like Mr. Salvation, he never wrote all those things that you know, there's some of the books of his floating around. But you know, students either they remembered, they recorded, and then that's how we had it. So it was the same thing with the others. And initially even he had his things hidden, but you know, I'm not going to go into the story, but eventually, you know, people found where they were, and then but in addition to being a Kabbalist, he also learned under that Rabbi Moshe Alter, so he definitely knew Halacha very well. And whatever, I don't think I'll go. Eventually, he this for a short while in spot after the Armenians all died, but then he moved to Miami, he comes to Saigon there, and but eventually, those are times of getting bad, he moved to okay, so apparently the book that was eventually published that considered their resolve, you know, thoughts and explanations of life. That's what they said. And okay, it says it forms the nucleus of many books on the Kabbalah, you know, which is a major thing. All right, so I finished that one. You then there was, remember we had talked about that tremendous controversy in Israel between the giving of Micha, you know, how they, you know, they wanted to revive whole Sanhedrin, but, you know, too much opposition, especially from Shalayim. I think we did this. So one of the key people there is Rabbi Yaakov Rav. He comes from Spain, and he was to North Africa, and then to Shalayim. All right, he is the one who wants to reestablish. So those Rabbanim who were living in Spain at the time thought big idea. So for example, he like grants me to Rabbi Yosef Caro, but the rabbi didn't like very opposed to it, and he eventually has to leave spot, and he goes to Damascus. It's so interesting, you know, how they go from. All right, so I think I finished those. Let me go on to my next group. Okay. Well, you see that name there. We're talking about it says Austria, Germany. That Rabbi Margolis. It was Nuremberg, Germany. Well, we don't have to know too much about them. But also the Rabbi Yosef Zuckelman from Milan, Russia. Rabbi Chaim Ben B'Tzal. Just tell me, Rabbi Green, if I'm mentioning any names that are prominent, you know. So these are now way into the century, but they're not even listed. Not as prominent. And then, of course, the most famous one will be Bohemian Rabbi and the Maharal of Prague. He was actually born in Poland, right? And he goes to Worms, right? And he served as Rav in numerous places. So I talk in Nichols, for something like India, becomes the chief rabbi of India. In 1573, he goes to Prague. He was very much opposed to the Pilsen. I guess that was here when I talk about. He stressed very vociferously that one should study Mishnah. And a student of his, Rabbi Yom Tov Whitman Keller, we'll talk about that later. He wrote the Maharal of Prague, where it says 16th century, at the bottom, there's even below. No, that's later. That's later. I just wanted to mention it to you because you're going to hear his name. So he was in charge of any takanos that were happening, you know, in the established communities of Bohemia. And he wrote a book called Bur Aryeh, which is actually a super commentary. It's a Rashi book. There are over like 100 commentaries on Rashi's commentaries. And for a while he went to Posen, and he comes back to Prague, did the CPA, and that's why he becomes known as this miracle worker, or, and he had interactions with the emperor, the emperor Caesar. We saw how brilliant man he was, and becomes the chief rabbi in Prague in 1698. Okay, it says here he synthesized Kabbalistic concepts with Agadic and Midrashic material. He wrote a work called the Er HaGorah to explain some of the other those. He had very strong opinions about Jewish education. He was against the practice of teaching young children Gemara. He said, that's why I say, big emphasis on study of the Mishnah. And you need, and emphasize you need a very strong foundation. Torah, not. He didn't like even if you study the weekly parsha. Just go through that as is, and he said it's very important to do. Torah, and he had all these Mishnah study books that established. Here's another man. He's now into the 16th century, Rabbi David Gann. Again, they're not listing all the people here that who I feel are important. Came from Germany, then he goes to Krakow. He actually stayed in the home of the Ramah, where he was raised and he taught and Prague, and he wrote a book called Tzemach David, which is a historical work. Okay, maybe you don't know who. Well, then this is Rabbi Yitzchak Hayek. He wrote a book called The Halacha work, based on Torah, and he also wrote a book called Yitzchak. All right, then not so much to note about him, but this Rabbi Shlomo Ephraim Bunchen. Okay, he could actually go to the 17th century. He served as a rabbi in Hamburg, which apparently is real broad. But then he became later life a rabbi in Prague, famous because he wrote the commentary on the Chumash called the Kli Yakar. Okay, so you notice that most of the rabbanim, though, they're becoming prominent because of their work in halacha, and here and there we have a few who also wrote commentaries, which then popular. Now here's the famous. His name is Rabbi Yeshaya Horowitz, and he's known as the Shlock. All right, the biblical subject. He was born at Nikhil. You're not sure where exactly he was born, but he eventually comes to Krakow, and he also is in Lublin, and then he has throughout Poland. He gets different rabbinic positions over his lifetime. There was a terrible uprising. You find for it online, and there was that milk uprising. He's one of the cameras, right? It comes back to Prague. Okay, but he loved, he wanted to go back. He yearned to be in Eretz Israel. So then he thinks of going to Israel, which he finally does in the year 1620. That's when he writes his famous book. And that's why he's known as this book. It was an ethical will, which he wrote to his children, because he's living without them. They're staying behind, but he has this desire to live. So he writes this magnificent work, and that's why he's so famous. And he also then traveled through different parts of Europe and the Middle East, writes about them. He comes eventually to Ryan, although he had been asked to be a rabbi in Damascus, but and he becomes a Rosh Yeshiva to the Ashkenazi community. And then he becomes aware of the Kabbalistic writings, and Greek. But already in 1625, the life there becomes turned for the worse because, again, because of the Ottoman authorities. He's arrested, whatever. He eventually settled down. So he was trying to go to the spot and then went to and he's buried near the tomb of the Rambam. This is such a girl. So the time comes there to go back to the area, I have to look into this. The next person I have here is Rabbi Eliyahu Lohan. Is he well known? Rabbi Green? I don't know. He came from Frankfurt on Main, but then he became rabbi in Tulsa, Hanau, Friedberg, and Würzburg. I think they're all German towns. Again, we're talking about the latter half of the 16th century going into the early part of the 17th century. He was considered a very saintly person and known as a man of miracles. Then there's this Maram Schiff. Okay, the next person, he also comes from Frankfurt on Main and becomes a rabbi in Fulda, so he's over 17 years old, and then he becomes the rabbi of Prague when he dies. He dies at the age of 36. I didn't know illness, now we have Rabbi Yom Tov Heller. Okay, he was born in Germany, a town called Heller. And then he learned in Friedberg, and then he said, Maral, we talked about it, and this Rabbi Ephraim Lucius, the Upper, Prague. He becomes the rabbi in Nikolsburg, Moravia. Nikolsburg obviously was a pretty important town in Moravia. And then he becomes a rabbi in Vienna. 1625, and he's the one who's responsible for making sure that Rias Polstadt is in, one of the neighborhoods in there, that would be considered and your play, I don't know, on board Polish stuff, but it talks about the Jews war, like 20th century, of what happened to them, like prior to, well, probably, it talks about them probably more 20th. And then, so the country did a 30-year war, which was 1848. We were like very and Bohemia. So he actually was responsible for sitting out the taxes and annually fair today. The people then came and complained about him to the emperor. The work that he wrote was negative to the emperor, in general. So in 1629, he leaves and he goes to Vienna, but there he's in prison to death. And then he's commuted to monetary. Then she's prohibited from holding a rabbinic post anywhere in the Austrian Empire, but apparently they had it restricted just to Prague. If you go to Lublin, Poland, Europe, Ukraine, and then he's 46-42, the rabbi of Ludmir, Poland. They spoke out about the practice of purchasing the rabbinate through unscrupulous means. Then he becomes Robin Krakow. You see how they go from place to place. And then he lived into that time period of the Cossack uprising, 48, 49, or goes into the 60s. And he tried to alleviate the plight of Ghost. He apparently wrote this excellent commentary to the Mishnah called Tosfos Yom Tov. So if you are a scholar of studying the Mishnah, you would study the commentary. There's almost all large Mishnah editions contain his work. And he obviously published other works. He wrote a criticism of the Lord of things like that. Because he popularized the ethics and treatise of the Rush, but he died penniless. He would never see any gifts through things way, get himself like a part in many controversies, and this is how he was. I'll do one more. Okay, Rabbi Shatzai Sheftel Horowitz. Again, he's born at the very end. I would say he's 17th century. He was born in Poland. He was the son of the Shalom. Remember, we left his son behind him when he went to live in Israel. So, but he came from a very prominent Jewish family. He studied under his father and also Yakar. He then became, if the father left, in 1621, he went to Zion in Prague, and then he came to Earth, Germany, and Frankfurt on Main. Then in 1642, he becomes rabbi in Poland, and then in 1654 becomes a rabbi of Vienna. He's the one who's responsible for publishing his father's work with and he writes a very extensive intro to the book. So, him. Okay. So I think I'll continue with this. And there's so many names here. They're all so common. It's like it's a little hard to sometimes, keep track and remember, who all of them are. But I just think it's so interesting this flux in between the different Jewish communities, how they're keeping in touch with one another. Yeshivos are being established, and we haven't even gotten to Poland. It's become the dominant, study learning. But it's still continuing, obviously, in parts of Germany, right? Some beginning in Poland already, at this time period. Because I'm already mentioning to you, some of one of the income. So each one impacts upon the others. Like I could remember, like my dad or even my father, they just float the names around like they're their friends and acquaintances, Because I guess when you're studying, it doesn't matter so much necessarily where they're from. It's just
the name.
It's right. Right. Yeah. So if I'm gonna, it could be so again. This I found this in a book, from the time period. It's charts, but I thought it's not 100%. And there were few names who I feel are important, which they don't include, and other names that are mentioned here, but I like it, didn't have it. So we'll pause here. So I think next time we're going to pick up with again those Jews sort of middle part of Europe, and we'll concentrate more on all those Polish giants, Poland and everything. All right. Sure I can do this.